Being true to our founding documents does not require us to agree on every contour of life. It does not mean we all define liberty in exactly the same way or follow the same precise path to happiness. Progress does not compel us to settle centuries-long debates about the role of government for all time, but it does require us to act in our time. For now, decisions are upon us, and we cannot afford delay. We cannot mistake absolutism for principle, or substitute spectacle for politics, or treat name-calling as reasoned debate. We must act. We must act knowing that our work will be imperfect. We must act knowing that today's victories will be only partial, and that it will be up to those who stand here in 4 years, and 40 years, and 400 years hence to advance the timeless spirit once conferred to us in a spare Philadelphia hall.
And there the president echoing a theme. He talked about one together. Some viewed it as a very a progressive address. Some others said that while there wasn't a lot of detail in it, it was, at least from a tonal standpoint, a president a lot more comfortable today than he was in the same stage 4 years earlier. But if there was one issue, I think that there's, forgetting the motivations, but from a practical standpoint, it's immigration reform. Everybody looked at the map after November, and then every Republican strategist said the same thing: we got to grow our base here. There's fewer whites every single election than there are. We need people other than just the white vote if we're going to win something nationally again. Help me figure this out. President Bush tried to have immigration reform, and he found blowback within his own party.
Republicans believe there are laws, and laws should be enforced. So they just start from that premise. And from that premise, they say, you came in here illegally, and yet there are a whole group of people who are waiting to come legally. It's wrong. And that's what they do. And it's not great politics, but it's what they think.
But George Bush thought, and he was obviously a governor from a border state before he became president, that there was a way to do this without rewarding and putting at the front of the line those who did that, but at the same end give a pathway to citizenship. If something like that came up again, politically, could the GOP come back in bigger numbers?
What stops it from just continuing from going on? I'm just giving you the argument. So everyone who came here illegally becomes a citizen? So now everybody...
Saying that.
That's
not the Democratic point of view.
What is the
Democratic point of view is there ought to be a pathway. That pathway can have hoops to jump over.
So you can come here illegally and become a citizen. That's the problem.
The answer is yes. Okay, you got 12 million human beings here.
No, it's probably 20.
I'll give you 20. You have 20 million human beings here. What are you going to do? What are they going to do? Throw them out? Or better yet, in Romney's words, self-deport?
No.
There's got to be a way to do this.
So let them work, but don't give them citizenship. Let them be here with dignity, but don't give them citizenship.
Rather than hammer out the details between you and I, which we probably could do, let's just do this. If the crazy element of the Republican Party again obstructs immigration reform, we won't get to this thoughtful discussion about how you hammer it out. Right. It will become the kind of thing that moved so many Hispanic voters into the Democratic column.
But there's another element to all of this too, Congressman, which is the core issues are one thing, but then once it enters the political microscope and the demagoguing begins on both sides, it really becomes not just about immigration, but almost about foreigners or about a certain element of xenophobia that catches on in some areas. And it becomes not an anti-immigration policy, but almost an anti-immigrant theme. And I think that hurts the party more than the actual positioning on the issue itself. I don't know how you would tell a Mexican family that the GOP is
it's great. It's not good politics. I'm just telling you. When you allow 20 million people to come in, you get another 40 because they're allowed to then bring their family members in. And so when we allowed 3 million to come in '87, we got 9 million.
Here's the problem. You have a reasonable, thoughtful guy expressing ideas that need to be addressed. Back in Washington, you have people running around with shooting guns in the air, yelling and screaming, and calling people
We
names.
need dialogue.
We're
You're
having
right.
one.
Yeah,
Can
exactly.
you give me someone from the Republican Party who's in office who'll do it?
Oh,
me
wait,
look.
wait. On this one, on a lot of things, I'd say you're more than right. But on this one, you've already had members of both the Senate and your former chamber in the House that have shown a willingness that should be on the table. Marco Rubio already put out a proposal here
We had
already.
McCain at one time.
McCain was on board with this
And they
before
got
he ran.
flogged back into obedience
I think there's something
by
different.
the crazy people.
What do you want? You want to win. You want to win elections, and everybody can do the math. Every pollster, we've had every Republican strategist who said the same thing. We got to grow.
So
we
there
got to be
needs to be a
appealing to
dialogue.
Latino
You got the
vote.
bottom line. If you have dialogue, we'll find a solution.
Okay, let me give you another one on
Good.
dialogue. And Dominic, it seems to me the president, and he said it again today, the one thing he doesn't want is his one signature issue from the first term, health care reform, to be, first of all, there's problems with it. He's the first to acknowledge it's not perfect, and he's got to change some. But he also doesn't want this thing fungible enough that the next person in could undo some of this. He's going to spend political capital on this, but he's got to show that this thing's actually done something. Because for a lot of people right now, it got passed, but they haven't seen the effects yet. For me, this is going to be a tough one, but I know he's going to spend some time and some political capital on it.
Well, there are minor ways where we can see where things have been done with the health care. For example, many kids, with the college kids, they would have aged out off of their parents' insurance, and they've been staying on up until the age of 25. The president has to spend capital on this. We're talking about his legacy. We're talking about 20 years from now, 30 years from now, maybe a little longer. This will be the defining issue of this president, besides the fact that he's African American. And so he has to put the capital in, and I think he's going to refine it in a way, if he can, without the obstructionists, where things will stick and
that
stand.
comes back to what I said, which is I think the president's got to also put some cuts on the table, and it's not just to say for defense. And Richard, you're tied to the progressive movement here, and also Andrew, I know you follow it. I'm sorry, but I think he's got to talk Medicare and he's got to talk Social Security.
With who?
And I think
With
he's got
crazy people?
No, but I think he's got to bring in the progressives who said they're off the table.
Never negotiate with yourself. That was the first rule I learned making decisions in the legislative body. He learned that decision from dealing with the Republicans. He made concessions. There's been $1 trillion worth of spending cuts. It does him no good to negotiate against himself. When the other side
how does he
shows
get
up,
a deal if he doesn't get any revenues on
he
the
gets
table?
a Speaker of the House who's empowered to cut a deal. So far, that
How
hasn't
can he
happened.
cut a deal with him when he don't control his caucus?
Guys, you can't say we have $1 trillion of cuts when the budget keeps going up and up and up. There's not $1 trillion of cuts.
By cuts, I meant slowing in growth and spending. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now that I've answered your question,
Okay.
who does he negotiate with?
You know what? He negotiates, believe it or not, with Paul Ryan. He negotiates with. Give Paul Ryan credit for one thing. At least he came up with a budget.
I give him credit. He negotiates with Paul Ryan, and Paul Ryan, rather than the Speaker, will deliver a majority of Republican votes?
Yeah.
No. You're going to do this with Democratic votes and a Republican minority. That's not a way to run a
Who is,
legislative
who,
body.
wait, but who really, you can argue Cantor, Boehner, and Ryan.
No.
Three people with three different agendas. Who does he
No,
negotiate with?
I don't think they have three different agendas. Boehner, and I know him well, is trying to get together a group of people that he can deliver to the president. When he, washed his
And give me
hands.
an idea, what's the number
Wh-
that
when-
means something? How many people does he have to bring along?
Well, let me ask you this.
16.
But why does he even have to bring 50%? Why does he have to bring 50%?
Because he's the majority party.
Yeah.
That's what happens. The majority party produces a majority of the votes. For a Speaker to admit going in,
Wait a
why
minute,
does he
no,
need 50%?
No,
Why
not
doesn't
a
he need
majority of the
80?
Republicans. He needs a majority of the
Yeah.
votes.
that is an interesting way of saying that a Republican Speaker is going to rely for governing
But
on the Democratic
what
Party.
happens if the Democrats get more than they want than Republicans? They're more likely to have more. When we negotiated with President Clinton, he came to the table with only a third. That's all that came, and we had 2/3. But President Clinton got credit for welfare reform, balancing the budget. We did it with more than a majority of Republicans and less Democrats, but we didn't care. We got it done.
I wish you were still there.
I think we all do.
But the challenge is, again, I come back to if all the Democrats will come along, if Nancy Pelosi keeps everybody in lockstep, how many Republicans will be willing to come with Boehner on deals that'll still keep Boehner in the speakership?
I will tell you this. You got a great Ways and Means committee chairman. He wants major tax reform.
Yeah.
And I'm talking not about cutting taxes for wealthy people. He wants to get rid of a lot of loopholes. If you can get rid of a lot of the loopholes, even if the wealthy have to pay more, you're going to have a lot of Republican votes there.
You think they'll support Obama if tax reform is not revenue neutral?
I think yes. I honestly do think.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. Because they will play up all the loopholes they got rid of and so on. It would be historic, but yes, that's the way we're going to balance the budget.
We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Remember, a little bit later, we're also gonna have for you Dr. King's I Have a Dream address. Today is the anniversary of the late Dr. King. Stay with us. We'll be right back.